Hey guys, so today I wanted to show you guys how to build this nice neat little ESP8266 07 or 12 to 01 adapter. So I decided to make this because I have yet to find a convenient adapter that lets me just pop on and off ESP07 or 12 modules for quick programming. I found a lot of things that have the ESP7 or 12s integrated onto a pre-made board, or boards that expand the pins on this to a more convenient form factor, but I had not found anything that just lets me pop the module on, flash it, take it off, and use it. So I made this little adapter here, which goes from the 07 or 12's 2mm spaced header pins to the same form factor, the 2.54mm spaced header pins on the 01 module. And so this allows for very easy, if you have a little flashing board, I've made this one modules. It makes it as easy as just plugging it right in, and then you can go ahead and flash your boards. So I made this for myself, and I wanted to share with you guys how I did it, because I personally think that the 07 and 12 modules are at least a lot more useful than the 01 modules. They have a lot more I/O broken out on them. They're smaller, and they don't have these built-in pins just sticking out the bottom of them. So I've really fallen in love with the 07 modules recently, and I actually have an order of 20 12 modules. So when those come in, this little adapter is going to get a lot more use. So let's get into how I built this. The parts that you're going to need are 2 lengths of the 2mm spaced header pins. So these are the header pins that can actually stick into the 07 or 12 modules. And these can be a little bit hard to find. I ordered mine from DigiKey. But you can also find these headers listed as the XB or Zigbee radio headers. It's the same pin spacing, and it's just a little bit smaller than the standard 2.54mm pins. So if you can find some of these, that's what you need. And then you also need either 2 separate 1x4 lengths of these standard 2.54mm headers, or if you can find a 2x4, if you have some of that laying around, that's also fine. I only happen to have 1x4s, so I'm just going to end up hot gluing these together to make a 2x4, but ultimately you'll end up connecting these into a 2x4 anyways. You're also going to need 8 in total wires. So I have these multicolored wires that actually came from a little multicolored ribbon cable here. I just separated them out because it's going to make it a lot easier to solder these together if they're separated. So you're going to need 8 of those in total. And I prefer to have multicolored wires when working with this, but if you only have one color, that's no problem. It just might get a little bit more confusing. And that's all the parts you actually need. Now, you will need a soldering iron and solder. And you will also, I highly recommend having a hot glue gun of some sort, or some way to glue all of this together into a neat little package. So those are the tools that you'll need. You will also need some sort of wire strippers to strip these wires and make it so you can solder them. And I believe that's it for all the tools and parts that you're going to need for this project. So let's get started building it. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to just pop the headers into the board. That way I at least have a good reference for which pins I'm soldering and connecting to each other. Pop it on my little bit of duct tape to keep it steady. And the first connection that I always make is the 07 and 12 modules have the GPIO 15 pin broken out. So that is the second pin from the right side here, and it's right next to ground. And in order to boot these modules correctly, that pin actually needs to be connected to ground. Now, on most of my modules, I have actually soldered a little bridge connecting those two pins, but I figure might as well be safe than sorry. So I actually fold this pin over and connect it and basically bridge it to ground, and then I make that connection final by soldering them together. So now the GPIO pin 15 and ground have been connected together. Then that's the step that I always start with, because that's one that I'm likely to forget if I don't. While we're already on the topic of ground, I figure next step, let's take our black wire, this is going to be my ground wire, and solder that to our little ground pin here. And there we go. Now we have our first wire, our ground wire, soldered and connected. Now, the next wire I want to do is the power wire. So I'm going to tin this wire and tin this connector. And now we have our power and ground. So at the very least, at the moment, we should be able to connect these two wires to ground and 3.3 volts, and our module should power up. The next wire I want to do is the TX wire. So this is a yellow wire that I'm using. I tend to always end up using yellow for TX from the device and orange for RX from the device. So get this soldered into the TX pin, like that. And now we get the RX pin connected. The blue wire I use as my reset wire. So solder this to the reset pin. The brown wire I'm connecting to the enable pin, or the CHPD pin. The gray wire here I'm going to connect to GPIO 0. And the last wire is this purple wire here, and this one is going to go to GPIO 2. So now we have this nice little spider web of wires here. There should be 3 wires on the side with power, with VCC. There should be VCC, CHEN, or the chip power down pin, and the reset pin. And on the left hand side, we have ground, GPIO 0, GPIO 2, RX, and TX. And with these wires connected, we can now go ahead and bring them all together and kind of fold them onto the inside of our little setup here. And this prepares us for the next step, which is to mount this all to our board here. So once you have all your wires in place like this, running kind of down the center, you're going to want to heat up your hot glue gun, because next step is we're going to be applying glue to this little board here and sticking it onto our setup here. First, I recommend just putting a little bit, a couple little beads of hot glue on your mounting board before you go full force and put a whole lot on. And this will allow us to just sort of place our base onto our board without making a big mess and without accidentally gluing the 07 or 12 board that we're using to hold the pins in place right now without accidentally gluing it to our base. So I'm just going to put just enough on here to get things started. I'm not going to put too much. I know it seems like there may even be a lot there, but we're going to add more later on when we actually want to solidify this in place. So for right now, that much glue will do, and I just place it on top of the pins like that. Give it a moment to cool off a little bit. We can flip it over, and it's still kind of molten. I can still move this around a little bit, straighten it up, make it a little bit nicer. But the main thing is that my 07 module is not affixed to the pins. And that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that you don't actually want to hot glue your board to your board here. You just want to glue these pins in place. Things have cooled down a little bit more and things are a little bit more firm. I'm going to take my hot glue gun and I'm just going to add hot glue around the edges of these pins here. Being careful again not to accidentally hot glue the module in place. We're still using it to just keep the pins held in their correct positions until we can get everything nicely cemented in with the hot glue. Have cooled off just a little bit more so that all of the pins are nicely solidly in place. I would recommend just going and laying down a nice big blob of solder in the center here, and this will just solidify all of our wires in place and keep them from moving around. Alright, so now that we have our base firmly attached and we have all of our soldered points on our headers to connect to the 07 or 12 modules, I like to go ahead and just clip the leads that I do not need off. That way, if on my module I have other devices connected to the pins that I am using, the non-programming pins, I don't have to deal with worrying about whether having this hole clear or not is important. I just have those pins clipped away. So the pins that you can clip away are on this side, on the side of ground. We can clip away the third and fourth from the right hand side here. So we can clip this pin here and this pin here. And then on the other side, we can clip the second from the right, and then we skip one, and we can clip all the way up to the VCC. So we skip, and then we clip, 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 and finally, last one clipped. And that removes all of the unnecessary pins so that when we put our module on, we are only placing it onto the pins that it actually needs for uploading new programs. Now, I'd also like to point out at this point, before we go further, that I understand that these pins do not provide the best connection ever. So if you have it and it just slides on just too cleanly and perfectly, there's a good chance that one of the pins that are necessary for uploading programs, especially the TX and RX pins, aren't making a solid connection on your board. So the way that I get around that is I have actually added little solder blobs to one side, to one end of the board. So on this far end here, I have little solder blobs that are just at the base of those pins there. And what that does is it forces the ESP module to fit on at a slight angle there, so it doesn't mate perfectly. And that basically makes it so that the pins are torqued just a little bit and more or less forces a good enough connection to upload programs. Is it the best solution? Obviously not, but this is also not the best solution for uploading programs onto your modules. But it does work, and I've made more than a couple of these at this point, and that method seems to work pretty well, just kind of adding a little bit of extra solder so that when you place the module on, it doesn't sit perfectly flat, but is a little bit torqued out of its axis. So once you have all of that completed, the last step that we have to do is to take all of these wires and solder them to our normal 2.54 millimeter spaced male headers. So to make this easier, I'm going to put my headers onto this little breadboard here, just to keep them held upright and in place while I'm soldering to them. Now, I've gone ahead and I've clipped all of these leads so that they are more or less the exact same length. I recommend you do the same. That way, when you get to the point that they're all soldered, you don't have any oddly long ones that are just sort of stragglers out there. They're all kind of neatly the same length. And I'm going to start again with positive. I'm going to start with the red one here. And on the video, there's a diagram showing which pins need to connect to which points on the O1. It's basically just an O1 pinout. And we're just going to connect all of these wires that we've connected on the O7 adapter here. And we're going to connect them to their corresponding points on the header pins, the O1 header pins. As you can see, I've finished now getting all of the pins here soldered for both sides of the header. And at this point, you should be functionally done. So you should be able to take both of these sets of headers and plug them into your programmer and pop your ESP module on and upload code. Now, there are a couple extra little things that I like to do with these to make them a little bit easier. First is just if you don't have a 2x4 header, you just have these 1x4 headers like me, I recommend hot gluing these two sections together to form a 2x4. So I do that most easily by just putting it into either breadboard or your socket here so that they're nice and neatly lined up. And then all you have to do is just take a hot glue gun and just put a little bit of hot glue around the wires and on both sides. And this will, not only will this hold the two headers together, but it'll also provide a small amount of strain relief on the wires. So once you let that cool, you can pop it out of the socket and you're good to go. I recommend even doing this hot gluing even if you do have 2x4s just for the strain relief on the wires. It actually does help a lot, and it prevents any stray little wires from desoldering or little bits of wire touching one of the other header pins because this is a free-form project. So I recommend doing that regardless. And now all that's left is to test it out. So I've got my USB here. I'm going to plug it into my computer off camera. And we have power on the FTDI module. Now when we upload our program, flashes and the programmer starts doing its thing, uploading the program. And then that's it, and we're done. And now we've flashed our little ESP87 module. And again, this also, the same adapter works for the 12 model as well. So hope you guys found that interesting. I have not found any convenient little adapters to upload programs onto these modules, so I went ahead and built this myself. and I hope this helps some of you guys out. I think that the 07 and 12 modules are just way more powerful and way more useful than the 01 modules, so this has been a really big help. So like this video if you found this interesting and useful, and if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to my channel, and you can also find me at It Kinda Works Inc. on Twitter, as well as itkindofworks.com. So thanks, and I'll see you guys later.